national security academic and one-time historian of ASIO, John Blaxland is these days based in the United States with the Australian National University. He's just returned from Washington, DC to Canberra. He joined us to discuss Julian Assange and Professor Blaxland's own recent writings on some big changes he thinks are needed to guide national security policy for Australia. John Blaxland, good to have you back with us on the program and here in the country. It's hard to go past the Julian Assange plea deal as the major news story of the day, and I'm keen to get your thoughts. The 14-year legal pursuit of him will probably come to an end tomorrow. I'm sure this will be celebrated as a victory by many. For those who aren't aware, you have worked around the intelligence community in this country for quite some time. You wrote the official history of ASIO. Do you see this as a victory?
So I think this is a victory for Julian Assange. I think it's a victory for the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. This has been something the government's been pushing for some time. And it's a compromise, you know. It's not the clear, unadulterated victory of somebody who's been vindicated as not guilty. It appears that the deal is that he's acknowledging guilt and that the time spent has been recognised as sufficient implicit punishment for his crime. But it is interesting to think about American law applying extraterritorially to a non-American citizen. And that is, I think, it's something we need to reflect on a little bit, because that is quite significant.
Would this be a difficult day for those in the US agencies that have been involved in this pursuit for a long time? I mean, we're talking about the Department of Justice, but also through them, the CIA, the Pentagon, the NSA. Is there a settled view there about enough is enough?
So I haven't heard of a settled view. I don't know if there is or isn't, but I think, to be fair, this is certainly, he's certainly been through quite a lot. It's been a long time, and in terms of the deterrent effect that US officials might seek, the effect of incarceration, the effect on his life, the length of time it's taken, the efforts that were involved would suggest that the deterrent effect is being reinforced. So the prospect of someone else behaving like this in future is diminished, I would say. I would also note that the circumstances have really changed since the time of the WikiLeaks, when Russia and China were not seen as nearly in such adversarial terms as they are today. And there was more ground given to Assange and his behaviour as being more acceptable, because in the grand scheme of things, you know, it was balancing the scorecard, if you like. Nowadays, there is a sense that that scorecard does not require balancing. The Russians and the Chinese already have a leg up, a significant advantage. Any further kind of leak by somebody who wanted a would-be WikiLeaks leaker would probably want to think twice before going down.
A lot has changed in strategic and international affairs since 2010, to be sure. There's also Chelsea Manning, of course, since the commutation of that sentence. Do you think that led inevitably to where we are now with Julian Assange getting, something similar by way of legal dispensation?
Yeah, no, I think there's probably a parallel point to be made there. Although, Manning went through the court system. He was an American citizen, tried in the United States. So it is slightly different.
Sure.
The circumstances are different. The legacy, I think it's important. People are very supportive of Julian Assange, and understandably so on a number of levels. But I think the scorecard is one that needs to be brought in mind, and that is that while it's easy to cast aspersions of what the Americans were doing in Iraq and Afghanistan, in the grand scheme of things, who benefited from this? And I would say that was not it was not to the advantage of liberal democracy, by and large. Russia gained out of this. Hillary Clinton suffered pretty badly out of this, and there's considerable increase of conspiratorial thinking about liberal Western democracies, which in the grand scheme of things, I think has done more harm than good.
What has been weaponised into mis- and disinformation?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's been misused. Information's been appropriated for political purposes. And while I think Assange probably had good intentions in, exposing malfeasance, if you like, the knock-on effects have been far-ranging and pretty toxic.
All right, thanks for sharing your views on that, John. We might move on to some of your more recent writings. You've been quite prolific and writing and assessing on Australian foreign and security policy, which you have assessed as entering a policy crisis with strong rivalries between the US, China, climate change, technological change thrown into the mix. What are you proposing as the antidote for that, particularly in government policy thinking and making here in Australia?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. So essentially what we're facing, because it's more than just climate change, it's more than just the rise of China, it's more than just terrorism and people smuggling, drug smuggling, transnational crime, and it's more than the fourth industrial revolution. It's all of that together. And no one agency at the moment grips that all up. And I think what we need is a National Institute for Net Assessment, a body that is a bit like a statutory authority that can draw in expertise from across the nation to consult and confer, to come up with ideas for what we can do as a nation to respond to the poly-crisis, the spectrum of challenges that we face, with a visionary long-term sense of what we need to do and how we need to get there.
Who else is doing this, or who else sort of sets the example to be followed?
Well, there really isn't another one out there. There's the people have said, John, there's the Office of National Intelligence. Surely they do something like that. Yeah, they do intelligence work, but they require people with top secret security clearances, and they work to the Prime Minister, briefing the Prime Minister behind closed doors. What I think we need to do is reflect on this more broadly, engage more of the community, not just people with a security clearance, and not just for intelligence briefing purposes, but to holistically think through policy implications of all the spectrum of research that's out there on the range of issues.
Yeah.
And to do it trying to do it in an apolitical way. In this day and age, it's very difficult, of course.
Yeah, no, there's good merit to the idea, and of course those minds would apply their task to lots of different policy fronts. One would be Pacific engagement. You might have noticed today, John, that the Solomons Prime Minister Jeremiah Manele is in Canberra on his first visit to this country since taking that office. It looks like some sort of reset is afoot, maybe a comprehensive strategic partnership with Solomons. Do you think this is a reset moment in that particular Pacific relationship?
Oh, there's no question. This is a moment in which a reset can take place. We'll see what happens in the next few hours in the meetings and what the Australian government can offer the Solomon Islands' new Prime Minister. That, fingers crossed, that can happen. What I've proposed in the paper is a Pacific Island Federation. So going beyond the Pacific Island Forum, a body that perhaps echoes some elements of what we see in the European Union, some elements of what we see in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. So maybe a hybrid body where we see this not as some kind of neo-colonial land grab, but as some kind of a post-colonial, collaborative, respectful, collegial engagement to meet the shared interests and concerns of the Pacific Islanders in terms of climate change, in terms of governance, in terms of the range of issues we're facing in the poly-crisis.
Yeah, it might take a bit of diplomacy to land that.
Oh, no question, absolutely. And it's problematic. I mean, already with the Falepili Union, we've seen pushback on that, but broadly that is, I think, a template for what can be expanded and offered more broadly across the Pacific as a constructive, a genuine gesture of goodwill with Australia's interests in mind as well.
Yeah, leave it with us. We'll put questions on that to others as we get a chance to on this program. John, just finally, since you're here, I can't let you go without a question about the dynamics in the US presidential campaign. How's Donald Trump looking? Do you think he's the one to beat at this stage?
Well, I think the debate coming up is going to be very, very telling. If you ask around Washington, D.C., where I live now, people are a bit nervous. They're a bit nervous about the outcome. It's looking like, I don't know, Trump's got a strong hand.
We'll keep an eye on that and talk again, maybe even from the States. John Blaxland, thanks so much.
Good to be with you, Greg.